that generator in the back, right? In case you run out of power, you can just charge her up. It's like it's spare power. All right, I guess I'll start with this. We'll make a scene today. So, we're on 729. We had an ego eimi statement. I studied him because from him I am. Likewise, he set me apart. And there are significant numbers of ego eimi statements in John, which we don't find in the other gospels. We'll find a few, but not a huge number. The next one we're at is this one in the NIV, and I do want to point this out. I put it out last week, but just to get you back up to speed, we know that this statement, I am, directly in Hebrew would mean God. It's Jehovah. And so I'll remind you again, ancient languages generally do not use the identity form in any state. It's considered unnecessary in most cases. In Hebrew, as you know, if you say I am, you have a serious problem because somebody's probably going to kill you, right? Or at least you're going to go to jail, they had people in jail in the ancient days, just kills you, right? So, if you claim I am, that is obviously making the statement that you're God, which is, you'd think that's negative. It is negative. For some reason, in especially the romantic languages, Romance languages, and also Germanic languages, as time went on, we see more and more of the identity form being used both in normal speech and in written. Well, it may come out of written speech. Why does it come out of written speech? Because if I can't see you physically, then I can't identify you. So you begin to use identity form, especially as you become literate, because in description, right? In description, I have to use he was a man, or, well, a man, right? I don't really have to say he was a man. I don't need to make that statement, but you do have to say he was dressed in a white robe with blue whatever, right? If you wanted to describe what a person looks like, he had high cheekbones. Those are identity forms that are not evident unless you see someone. And as you become literate, you begin to use identity to describe things and people. For example, a great example, if you had never seen the church before, and I was describing the church to you, I would use identity form like crazy. Now, I wouldn't use I am form because there's no need to, but I'd use it was, it looked, right? Looked is not identity form directly, but we put was in the place of many declarative verbs. Anyway, who cares? It's languages. You say, why are languages the way they are? They are the way they are because of the culture and societies and the capabilities of the culture. Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe I misunderstood what you said, that in the ancient world, they didn't speak identity. I mean, you can't say, I'm going to the temple. I mean, how would you express yourself going to the temple? Or I mean, you just skip the I or something? Or you say your name? Or
Well, in general, remember, now there are verb forms that are similar, but I'm going to the temple is not an identity form. I am going to the temple is an action verb, an intransitive action verb. Okay, now we're getting the vocabulary depth, right? But think about it this way. If you're a person, okay, we in our culture and society, right, we're used to going to Denver, Rome, Paris. We go all over the world. The person in the ancient world, we know this. They didn't move more than 10 miles away from where they lived. Even in America, once a person, they take the covered wagon, but once they got to the little house on the prairie, how far did they get away from the little house on the prairie? Right? So in the ancient world and in the world until transportation, until really cars and airplanes, people were stuck in their areas. So I don't need to describe the county store to you. You've been there since you were like this high and could walk behind your dad and watch out for the cow patties, right? You know what I'm talking about? So you knew, there's no reason for me to tell you, USA was an identity form at all, right? The only time I need to use identity form is when you're the kids and you're saying, yeah, I know about this great hole where you can, go fishing and skinny dipping, right? Or I know this great field where you can go hunting. And so if you want to describe it, now you begin to move into identity form because it's a place you've never seen before. However, as I mentioned, in English, as well as other languages, there are other verbs you can use. It looked like, he wore, etc. The thing is that we become, not only do our society become lazy, our language becomes lazy. Our language is very interesting. Once you can use identity forms, it's everywhere. Look in your books, right? We always tell writers to stop using identity if possible and use more and stronger verb forms. Why? Because people love to use identity. It's once you got it. I can use was for everything.
People ask you all the time, what do you do? Oh, I'm a pilot. Oh, I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm a whatever.
Yeah.
And that's how we, that's
Part of that is, okay,
our culture.
think about this too. Okay, if I walk in and I'm wearing a flight suit or a pilot's uniform with epaulets, would you say, are you a pilot? Well, you might, because that's our culture, right? But the answer in the ancient world would be, duh, if you walk around and you're a fisherman, not only do you look like a fisherman, you smell like a fisherman. I'm not kidding, right? And you got your fish knife in the side. Hey, are you a fisherman? What kind of part of the world are you from, right? So, yeah, the world today is different. It's a different world. We think very differently than the ancient world. So the identity form is just, it's rare. And if you remember back in the other Gospels, so we haven't done Luke, but I did Matthew and Mark. And if you remember back, there was almost zero use of identity. But in John, we see it almost like every other statement, right? And you go, wow, what's the difference? And I tell you, the difference is, if you haven't noticed, it's probably being written to the Greeks and Romans. The Romans mostly because the Romans were all into identity. Why were the Romans into identity? They were starting to move. Remember how large a territory the Romans control? Right? All the way from one end of the Med to the other. They were really the first great diverse empire, right? Diversity is a famous word today, right? We love diversity. The diversity of the Roman Empire was enormous. So if you want to describe things in the Roman Empire and you are in the upper level of stratum, and by the way, who are the writers? Who are recording things? Who are doing things? It's the upper stratum. It's not the lowest. It's not the lowest, really not middle class. It's the upper class who are sending letters at $20,000 a pop with a scroll slave to go with the letter, right? So the world is different, but the world is changing. And so when you have a world that suddenly goes from England, matter of fact, Scotland, Hibernian, and there's the wall in Scotland, right? Because they didn't want to touch the Scots. The Scots were dangerous, even though they didn't wear kilts at the time. And then you go all the way to the Persian Empire, right? To the edge of the Persian Empire into India. Wow, that is huge cultural differences. So the Romans were the ones who were doing that. And I'm telling you, I think John was really written for the Romans and Greeks, mostly in its context. Anyway, at this, they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. Okay, well, it's not a bad translation, but we'll see what it says. Here's the King James and the Greek. Now this is, remember, the Festival of Booths, Festival of Tabernacles. It's huge. We're going to get there. Okay, so he said what he said. He made this claim, again, to be God. It's a different way of stating it. They sought to take him, and no man laid hands on him because his hour was not yet come. They were seeking to worship or plot. That's that zetoi verb. They were seeking to worship or plot, according certainly him, to squeeze, press. This is translated to take. It literally means to squeeze. You know, English, we have way euphemistic uses of words. The Greek is not as euphemistic. To squeeze, to press, and odes, not even one. Threw upon. Abalo, epibalon, right? Balo, balo, parabolo, hyperbolo, right? Here's an epibalon. Epibalon means to throw upon. So it's not a, you know how our other balo words have to do with a logos generally? This does not have to do with the logos, but epibalon, balo is to throw, and epibalon means to throw upon. Epi, honor against him, the chira, hand, that are because not yet had come or gone. That's the very common word that the Greek uses, come or go. The hora, the time or period of an hour of him. I also want to point this out. You know, hora means a time or period, but you notice it looks like hour, right? And it is translated. It can be translated in hour. What's the problem with time?
How do they measure it? It's not like they have their digital watch on.
Yeah. What do you got? Your sundial on your wrist, right? Yeah. How do you measure time? Anybody lived in Spain? Anybody lived in Mexico? Anybody lived in the Latin world-ish? We call it Latin world, but the Latin background world. Okay. What does "I'll meet you at 7" mean?
10.
Yeah.
Whenever I get around to it.
Yeah. Whenever I get around to it.
Whenever I
Yeah.
get up.
What does it mean when you say the siesta, right? And when is lunch, right? Like maybe 2, right? When is dinner? 10, maybe, hey, when a person asks you to his house, if you show up at 7, they say 7, they're like, what? They expect to be a little later. Of course, anyway, it's how do people view time? And if you don't have your digital watch, you don't have your Swiss watch, you don't have your chronometer, what do you got? You're carrying around a water clock? Just saying. Anyway, so hora means a period of time or a period. It can be translated hour, but hour is although the Greeks are very concrete, it is much more concrete to say time or a period than to specify something that doesn't exist in your culture, really, right? Doesn't really commonly exist. Accordingly, they were seeking to plot to squeeze him, to press him, and not even one threw out their hand against him because not yet had come his time. Now, I'm going to mention this because this is really an interesting thing about ancient cultures. If you know anything about there are different types of culture. But in general, we find in ancient cultures and cultures of older status, you'll find this in Japan, you'll find it in China. Okay, how do people greet each other in Asian cultures generally?
Just a bow.
They bow, right? You're off. In European cultures, generally, how do we greet? The hand. We shake hands. Why do we shake hands? Make sure that, yes, that's it. You make sure they're not armed because your right hand is your armed hand. And so what you did, right, is you basically want to show your left hand and you want to reach out with your right hand because that way whoever you're greeting knows that you're not armed. And by the way, there's another thing about Western cultures. Okay, what are you also doing when you are shaking a hand? The grip strength. Yes, that's why. Maybe you don't know, maybe you do know. How do you greet a woman in Western culture?
I'm gonna kiss.
No, sir.
Very gentle.
No, sir. You wait for the woman to extend their hand. You take her hand on top of yours. Pressing the fingers was considered at one point in time to be very intimate. Pressing the fingers meant you were a friend. But you do not press, squeeze, or in any other way harm a woman's hand. Later in history, you bowed over a woman's hand if she were of higher rank than you. You did not kiss her hand. Kissing her hand is that is false. That is the reason people got it wrong. Why do you think people got it wrong?
Take the bowing, thinking that they were kissing.
They're a little close to the hand. Huh?
Because you do kiss, who do you kiss the hand of? The queen, king, the pope, the cardinal, the bishop. You actually don't kiss the hand. What do you kiss?
Ring.
You kiss the ring of their authority. It's a abject thing of authority. It's like laying on your back if you're a dog and sticking your legs up in the air, right? You're
But you know,
great.
the Italians like to kiss cheeks.
Now, what happened? What caused the kissing of the cheeks? Do you know?
Well, no, I don't.
There's a thing called the Holy Kiss. And the Holy Kiss started with Christianity. And Christianity did something that was astounding in the world. Where the Greek, remember I told you the Greeks? The biggest deal to the Greeks was charis, to greet a person. So I told you, if you're a Greek and you're walking down the street, okay, slaves might say charis. Of course, slaves aren't usually allowed out alone, but might greet. People of equal status might greet charis. But if there's an upper status person and you're a lower status or a slave, are you going to get greeted? No, it's not the way it works. So there ain't no bows, there ain't no touching, there ain't no nothing, right? Christianity caused a great upheaval in the world. And the great upheaval was that it's still not permissible for men and women to touch one another, but it became okay, especially for men, to touch other men and women to touch other women. And the holy kiss became a huge thing. We even see it referenced in Scripture. Greet them with a holy kiss. The reason was because that was the charis. The charis was, okay, it wasn't just, okay, I'm the wealthy dude and you're the slave, and you greet me and go, charis, hey there, Bob, how you doing, right? It was, how did you show that person was equal to you? A male would give another male a holy kiss. They would kiss him on the side, usually on the side of the neck. But it was, it began as the brushing. The brushing, right? Cheek to cheek. And then it became the holy kiss. That is actually a kiss. Yes, sir.
Well, Jesus was betrayed with a kiss. Well, how was that?
Aha.
That was before Christianity. Get it?
We are talking about polite and normal society. We have not moved into intimate society. Okay? I'll get to intimate society, but let's start with just general society. So until this point, until Christianity really became, set, there was the holy kiss was given to anyone, usually of a Christian. It's the way you identified a Christian. So the holy kiss, and by the way, you notice where we find it. Anglo-Saxons generally don't give the holy kiss, right? Anglo-Saxons are also the ones that said, I want to see what you have in your hand. So, you see how this became. It came from the Greeks into the Romans, into the early church, and it was mostly a romantic kind of thing, right? Romance language thing. And then it began to move, well, we never got in Anglo-Saxon culture, which most of us all are Anglo-Saxon culture to some degree, or Slavic culture. We never got to that point, really, where the holy kiss was considered normative. Now, intimacy. How did you know someone was an intimate? Remember, I told you, in the ancient world and even in certain cultures today, you do not touch people. Matter of fact, touching in Anglo-Saxon cultures was usually punishable, especially touching the opposite sex, touching them, just touching them. was considered a sexual assault. You could go to jail for that, or put in the stocks. So you stayed back. You kept back. Now, if you have intimates, like husband and wives, whatever, supposedly children, the thing was you could greet them, right? And remember, shield warriors by the cultures. How do you think you greeted your shield warrior, for goodness sake? It's a kiss. You didn't kiss your wife on the lips. You kissed the shield warrior on the lips. Not because you had some kind of thing going on. It's because that was an intimacy that was especially for them. And by the way, let me tell you something. There are cultures in the world today, and many of us would actually say that in the Anglo-Saxon culture, which is probably true, did parents hug their children in the Victorian era?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Exactly. Keep a stiff upper lip was the British thing, right? When the kid came home and he had his scratched knees, Mama would say, that's not good, Billy. Would she give him a hug? No, she wouldn't give him a hug. She'd take some of that whatever that mercurochrome, right?
Yeah, she gives it to the nanny.
At first she'd give him the nanny, right? Here. The kid's screaming. Stop the kid from screaming, right? Yeah, but keep a stiff upper lip. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. There are cultures, the Japanese culture, is very into not being physical in any way with their children. The only way they're physical, you find this a lot. You find, especially sibling, and you find that in the Korean cultures, you find it in Japanese cultures. It ain't hugging, it's squeezing. It's fighting, wrestling, and smacking. That's their culture. You say, well, that's not our culture, and it's foreign to us. Today we want, in fact, today, you're lucky if a kid ever got, what do they do? They used to put them in the corner. Now you get time out. You get time out, Billy. Wait, where's Billy? Look, kids got it figured out. There's no physical punishment. They ain't going to be punished. There's nothing going on. Anyway, I'm just telling you, as you see in cultures, it's really interesting that intimacy between shield warriors or brothers or those who are, intimate meaning they are friends, right? And you got to realize this. Why are men and women considered love or intimacy in our culture? And it's not sex. It's because of chivalry. It's because of the chivalric idea of chivalric love. How were all the marriages up to the age of Christianity? How were they all developed? They're all arranged. I've already told you about ancient marriage. The woman and the guy, yeah, they probably got some. If she saw him and he goes, maybe just maybe she'd get a pitch, a ball, right? Or the guy, if he saw a lady, it's like, well, that's why. Guess what they wore? Veils, stuff covering. If you cover the hair in a veil, she don't know she's like 85 years old and, with no teeth. Or 25 years old with no teeth. Oh, that's really interesting. But that's the way the world was. Chivalric love is what got the idea that sexual intimacy was mixed with the idea of love. It doesn't exist in Hebrew. It really doesn't exist in Greek very much. You see some of it, some words, but there is no word for love in Hebrew. None at all. These two borrowed words, and they're not very happy. There's no word for love in a lot of ancient languages. In Japanese, what's interesting, you can like someone, or daisuke, you really like someone. But there really is no, koi is close, but there's no real word for love. It's a really ancient kind of language. I don't know about other Asian languages because, I just happen to get a lot of attention with Japanese because I'm interested in the culture. But I'm just telling you, our views of the world are very different than the other cultures' views of the world. And this Greek culture is different. So, accordingly, they were seeking to plot or squeeze, press him, and not even one threw out their hand against him because they had not yet come his time. This is an unstated telos, because who was trying to kill him? Who was trying to plot against him? Remember, the people said, "You're crazy," because who is trying to harm you? Right? It's the priests and the Pharisees. Unstated telos. Still, many in the crowd believed in him. They said, "When the Messiah comes, will he perform more signs than this man?" Oh, let's skip one. Okay, 31. Yeah, we're at 31. That's good. Trying to mess with me. And many people believed on him and said, "When Christ cometh, will he do more miracles than these which this man hath done?" Act from out among the throng, Pole, much many epison were convinced. Episoian, they were convinced of a logical argument to or into him, and Elasion, they were making a logical argument. Christ Christos, the anointed one. Notice, Greek word. Hotan, whether inasmuch he comes or goes, me or me, not or least, more in quantity, number, or quality, also the major, me not or least, Pleatha, more in quantity, number, etc., major portion, Simeon, supernatural similar indications, he will make or do. Who, which, or what, hotos, he, she, or it, the poison has made or done. I want to point out a couple of things. We're going to, the Athanasian Creed is full of the word faith. Okay, there's a problem with the word faith because there's no such word as faith in Greek. The closest word for faith, in fact, the words translate faith and in Greek is pistus, and pisteo. Pistus is the verb, were convinced of a logical argument, and pisteo is to have been convinced of a logical argument. One is a noun, one is a verb. We use the word faith. Where did the word faith come from? Any idea? It's both Roman and it's Anglo-Saxon. The Romans do not have a word. The Greeks are really highly reflective, rational-ish, society, culture. So the Greeks are into being convinced. The idea that we have about faith is what? It is blind, right? About things you don't see or know. Wait a second. Have you ever seen that anywhere in the New Testament we've seen?
Yeah,
Have you?
there was one, was
Is
it
there?
Paul that said faith is about believing things we haven't seen, something like that?
Being convinced of things you haven't seen. Are you convinced of mathematics? I
You
am.
put two things together and
What?
two more things together, and I know I have four things.
Can you see mathematics? I mean, we write mathematics, but is that seeing it? What is that? Those are symbols, right? Those are abstract symbols. You can't see mathematics.
Oh, it's Hebrew, sorry, not
Well, my
Hebrews
point
11.
is this.
But that word just translated as pistis.
The Greeks are into rationality. And remember, we have the Greek worldview. Now, we are part of the Greek worldview, whether we want to or not. And that means there is those things, that are outside of the creation. God is in the plenum of everything. I could draw the picture, I guess. The plenum of everything, there is the cosmos, the creation. Within the creation is the phileo, the philosophia. Philosophia is those things which we can comprehend and know. Guess what? Within that is the gay. And the gay is not. The gay does not include, it only includes things that you can really physically see and whatever. So I can touch this, right? But I can't see the atoms. I mean, the pastor's going to talk about atoms and molecules. I don't believe in atoms and molecules. I'm convinced there are atoms and molecules. Is there a difference? I think there's a pretty big difference, but that's I'm Greek. I'm thinking Greek here, right? So when people say in my books all the time, they say, "Do you believe?" My characters respond, "I don't believe, I know." Belief is squishy. If you know, it's concrete, right? If I believe, am I convinced?
At that moment,
Maybe. If I know, am I convinced? Yo, you betcha. See, okay, I'm going to touch a
In order to
theological
believe,
thing
you have
here.
to know some stuff.
What's that?
In order to believe, you have to know some stuff.
I agree with that too. In order to be convinced, you have to be convinced, right?
so there's evidence.
To believe, there's evidence, but to believe, people would ask, well, do you believe? What in English, I'd say, well, what do you mean?
We're talking in terms of likelihood, so it's scale as opposed to, okay, yeah, there's a 50% chance that's right, or 75% chance you're right, but maybe not.
But if you know,
Then you're
100%, yes.
I'm just thinking faith is based on taking someone at their word. You're placing the entire convincing process on their credibility, whether they seem like a person who knows what they're talking about. So they don't really necessarily convince you of something, but you don't question that what they have said is true. So that's kind of the way I kind of envision faith.
Yeah, and that's why I don't even want to touch faith that way, because our whole thing here, what do we have from Jesus in John especially, but all the other gospels too? In all this, John is presenting us a what?
Logical argument.
A logical argument. Does this logical argument depend on the trustworthiness of Jesus? If Jesus feeds 5,000, right? What does that tell you? Right? John takes feeding 5,000 and turns it into what? A whole logos to an unstated telos, and unfortunately he gives us a couple little stated teloses, which is kind of cute, right? But he takes here's the thing that you have to trust in. And that's why at the very beginning of the class, what do I do at the beginning of every class? I prove the veracity of the text. Now, you can toss out, if you want, the veracity of the text and say, well, I don't believe it. But what are you doing? You need to throw out Caesar and Epictetus and Hippocrates. You got to throw them all out. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. You don't trust the New Testament. By the way, if you don't trust the New Testament documents, why do you trust why do you trust anything? Why do you trust what you read in the paper? Right?
We don't.
You're learning, right?
Well, that's like what he said about destroying your credibility.
Well, when I read the paper every day, I read it, it says, it gives the opinions of people. But what does the New Testament tell us? It gives us historical evidence and facts. Now, when someone gives you historical evidence and facts and they say, this is what I saw, right? Can you trust? Well, you may say, if the person is trustworthy, I can trust them. If they're not trustworthy, I can't trust
The
them.
modern media even makes up, they outright lie about stuff.
They
You can't
do.
even trust the things that are supposedly facts.
That's right. And well, I've seen that too. In the Wall Street Journal, you read something and they quote, some person, and then you go actually read the quote and you go, huh? What? What did you do? Oh, we're just synopsizing the quote so you understand. Okay, beyond that point, I just really want to be clear. The Greeks are into the idea of being convinced of a logical argument. And the logical argument is, when we say that, okay, I know this is kind of foreign to us, but you always have definitions, you have assumptions, you have the logical argument, and you have the conclusions. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That's what you learn. It's a logical proof. We call them proofs. And you learn them in mathematics, or you're supposed to learn them in mathematics, right? Then we forget them. But anyway, that is what the writers of the writer of this gospel, John, is trying to do for us about Jesus. And again, it's like, thank you, because when you ask that question, it's beautiful. There are many things we don't see, but we are convinced. If you say, I believe, really, in certain contexts, if I say I believe in mathematics. I believe in airplanes. I believe airplanes can fly. Right? I believe in aerodynamics. Well, my goodness gracious. There's a Learjet flying overhead, and you believe in aerodynamics? That's really special, right? You see what I'm saying? We would never, we generally in our culture and society, and by the way, where does that come from? The paganistic backgrounds of Anglo-Saxon and also the vocabulary in Anglo-Saxon.
There's some people that still don't believe we landed on the moon.
That is true.
And there are still people that believe the world is flat. They're called flat earthers, and they are out there.
And they're crazy heads because
Yes.
They don't listen to anything.
well, I've seen the curvature of the earth. I've been around the earth more than once. It's like, come on, dudes. Are you stupid? Yes. The problem is they haven't been taught the Greek methods of knowing truth. If you know the three methods of knowing truth from the Greeks, which, by the way, there are no others. There's harm strategy. That's something else entirely. Anyway.
Well, we've taught everybody that you make your own truth. So there's no standards for truth now at all.
True.
So, I mean, according to the world standards, the flat earthers are just as legitimate as anybody else.
There was an article they were talking about, a survey, and a high percentage said there is no truth, it's relative.
Of even Christians. Yeah. I get the Christian Post, and the Christian Post does Bartha or whatever, the Bartha, whatever, and Barma, anyway,
Polling?
the polling, yeah,
Barna.
and they say that less than 5% of evangelical Christians have a biblical worldview. Less than 5%. I tell you what, man, with less than 5%, there ain't a whole lot of people going to go to heaven, right? Because the Anastasian Creed, they ain't even close, you got a serious issue going on. But anyway, just saying. So, but from out of the throng, many were convinced of logical argument into him. See what that says in the Greek? Not faith. Many were convinced by a logical argument to him, and they were making a logical argument. So, what does it do when you are convinced? Therefore, you have the ability. Why do you have if you're convinced? Why do you have the ability? Well, why are you supposed to have the ability to then make a logical argument? Supposedly, if I understand about atoms, and okay, I know Heisenberg equations, or let's say I know, the equations of flight, or if I know, right? If I am educated in a subject and I understand the subject and I am convinced of that subject, I should be able to then have the tools to make a logical argument that then allow me to communicate that to others. That's a supposed, that's a Greek supposition, which I think is a good supposition, but it's the thing. So they're making a logical argument. The Christ, the anointed one, and look what word they used. Did they say Messias? Who was the person that used the word Messiah? Messias. What's that?
Hebrews.
Well, they used it, but who used it in our gospel, in John? The woman at the well. Isn't it funny that the woman at the well, and you say this could have been John, but I don't think it was John. The Samaritan woman at the well says, we are expecting the Messiah, using the Hebrew term, also called the Christ, the anointed one. She uses both. And this throng in Jerusalem uses the term Christ. Does that kind of key something in your mind? I don't think it's John using. I think John's reporting exactly what's happening. I think he's a trustworthy witness to the events, and so he's there. And what are the crowd calling Jesus? The Christ.
Is that Greek? Is that what that's mean?
It means they're speaking Greek. and it means they're thinking Greek. The woman at the well, why do you think the woman at the well would be thinking Aramaic and Greek? Because of her culture. And this is the thing that I think is very important. You know, like I said, I've been talking about cultures almost the whole class, but cultures are really important. The Samaritan woman is obviously thinking in terms of Hebrew or Aramaic and Greek. She's obviously conversant in both. The crowds into Jerusalem are thinking in terms of the Greek. Now, this is great for John's audience because I told you, I think John's audience is mostly Greek and Roman. So the Greek and Romans hear this and they go, I understand, right? It's really funny that the context of the throng of the people, the group, and by the way, throng, I should probably mention this. I don't have my notes in here about it, but this word, achlo, achon, meaning a throng, it has to do, it's not just, to us, a throng is just a group, right, of all kinds of diverse people. And achelon in Greek means a not so diverse group. In other words, it's not the wealthy guys, they're not enough to be a throng. There's not a throng of the wealthy high priest dudes, right? And there's probably not enough to have a throng of the petosis. The petosis are the beggars, the poor, those who can't even bend up, the ones who are unable to make a living, you know, those that are sitting on the street corners because they're missing limbs or other terrible things, right? Or beggars like lepers, whatever. So they probably aren't enough to make a throng. The point is that throng in Greek means a kind of not very diverse group, not just of general people, but a group of a specific group of people. So it probably means the poor middle class, whatever, you know, whoever is hanging that are Hebrew. Yes, sir, or in that city.
Are you suggesting that the people in Jerusalem are more Hellenized, for instance, than the Samaritan woman?
Yes.
Is that why that's why the term Christ is used?
I would argue that 100%, yes. I think they are really Hellenized.
This is at the Festival of the Booths, right? So there'll be a lot of people from other places there.
Uh-huh. But guess where they're coming from? Mostly. Well, they're not coming from Samaria.
Places that were Hellenized.
Well, yeah, they're coming from the Galil, right? They're coming from Judea, South Judea, in that area. That's about all there are. Are the Samaritans welcome? No, they're not, because they're not as Hellenized. I think that's my point. That's the observation I was trying to make, that I think that the Jerusalem clock, matter of fact, the names of the disciples, you got 12 guys there, and how many have Hebrew names? Like 2, right? Jesus has a Hebrew name. Woohoo! Joshua, right? But the other guys, none of the others have Hebrew names. Whoa. Just saying. I think that we are looking at a highly Hellenized culture in society, and that's another reason why John was writing mainly to them. You know, whatever he comes, no more in quantity, number, or quality of supernatural or ceremony indications he will make, which he has done. Okay, so remember, at the beginning of this whole thing, every time we have a supernatural or we have not had one necessarily at the beginning of the Festival of Booths, right, in this one, but every other instance we had a supernatural thing. What is the supernatural occurrence in the Festival of Booths that Jesus did? It's not really stated. He said, I am. He said, I am in the context of God. Anyway, let's continue. 32, the Pharisees heard the crowd whispering such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. There's more to this story. We're going to get to it. The Pharisees heard the people murmur such things concerning him, and the Pharisees and the chief priests and officers to take him. They heard a question, the Pharisee of the Uchel of the throng, of grumbling. It wasn't murmuring, it wasn't whispering, it's zontos. We had that word before. All through of him, tauta, these, they set apart the archieres, the chief priests, and hoi, the Pharisees, prosoi, hypertas, under oarsmen. And this is interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit. In order that they might press this, him. The reason we use this word is because in general, all right, if you're going to take people, how do you got to take people? You can't pull out your sidearm, right? And are they armed? In the temple area, they might be. In my book, I said they were armed in the temple area. But do the Romans let you carry swords? No, they don't. You can't carry weapons if you're not a Roman citizen. And if you're especially not, by the way, all Roman citizens could carry arms. But the legion could afford them because the legion provided to them. So they have arms. So if you want to get somebody, what do you got to do?
You gotta squeeze them.
You got to squeeze them. Yeah. And the best way to squeeze them, and by the way, this is a technique that the Egyptians invented that destroyed chariots. The Egyptians invented the squeeze method to get rid of chariots. The chariots were always two horses carrying a light chariot with a driver and an archer, and almost always nobility. They're always nobility. So the way that you got rid of this and the way the Egyptians developed a technique to get rid of chariots was you took a group of infantry and you didn't even have to have them armed. They didn't even have to be armed. All they had to do was surround the chariot and squeeze. Because what happened? They couldn't move. They couldn't do anything. What are they going to do? Shoot. Look, if you're right up to a guy, is he going to be able to take his composite bow and wang you? No. He's going to have to beat on you, right? So they would squeeze them. This is a great technique. This is a technique that's used in the ancient world a lot when they're disarmed because they surround you and they squeeze you.
And the Japanese do it on the trains. If you sneeze, we call it budging. They budge you off the train because when it comes to a stop, the group just gets together and moves you off. It's true. They do it. They work as a group.
Don't sneeze on a
Don't
train.
sneeze on a public
That's
train
crazy.
without a mask. They'll do that to you.
The Pharisees heard the throng grumbling about him over these, and the chief priests and the Pharisees set apart under oarsmen in order that they might squeeze him. Now, the thing is, under oarsmen, this word is, I love this word, hyperetas. Hyperetas. Remember, Greek culture is all about boats and rowing, Athenian Greek, right? And we're using Koine Greek, but guess where Koine Greek came from? Came from Athenian Greek. And Athenian Greek is big time into under oarsmen. Okay, under oarsmen mean those guys whose job is to row. So they sent their henchmen, okay? But it's really cool, and I know we say, okay, sent officers to take him, which is not bad, because under oarsmen could be, but you're right. You're shaking your head because under oarsmen are the guys, okay, if you remember Ben-Hur, right? You have a bunch of guys on the oar, and the guy that's on the outside is supposed to be the main dude. He's the under oarsman. The other oarsmen, right, are the oarsmen that are under him. So guess what? When you moved up, they moved you up to the top because you could keep the beat and you were strong enough to do the big pull, right? You put the weakest guy on the inside because you didn't have to pull as much. Anyway, it's all Greek. It's all beautiful Greek. Now, what's really interesting about this is the first incident I believe we have of this word archpriest or chief priest, and it's plural. How many priests are there supposed to be? A high priest.
One.
There's one high priest. He's supposed to come from Aaron, right?
Yep.
From the lineage of Aaron. How many high priests do they have? Well, we don't know. The high priest is obviously more than probably two. It's plural. It didn't use a beta form to tell us both high priests, beta high priests. Instead, it told us the high priests and the Pharisees, which means, the Pharisee in the Sanhedrin, we know, was a small group, maybe 4 or 5 max during this time. So in the Sanhedrin is mostly the priests, right? And the high priests oversee the Sanhedrin under the Sadducees. So what this is literally telling us is the leaders of the Pharisees and the leaders of the priests, the Sadducees, were yakking. And why? And everybody should know, why are there priests, high priests? There's supposed to be only one high priest, and we got a whole bunch here. Jesus said, I am with you only for a short time, and then I'm going to the one who sent me. All right. This is a really neat verse. Then they said, Jesus unto them, in a little while I'm with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. Here's what it really says. And he said, certainly accordingly, Jesus. Even now, chronon, a time of the gods. Chronos means time of the gods. It does not mean, it's not like hora, a period. It's not like a year. It is not like pathos. It is chronos. It's the time of the gods. Little or small, macron, meth, in company with you, I am, imi. Now, it doesn't use ego, so it's a, a condensed form. So it doesn't say ego imi. So if he doesn't say ego imi, he's not going to get in too much trouble. He just says imi. Imi, I am. And hapagino, I lead under, pro forward to the pimsanta, he having sent me. Me is me in Greek, which makes it easy, right? Accordingly, Jesus said, even now I am in company with you a short time of the gods, and I lead under forward to he having sent me. Now, this is very different than our translators tell us. What this is saying to me is pretty obvious in Greek, very concrete. Even now, he's in company with you in the time of the gods. He's affirming something. He's affirming it's the aeonen of the Messiah. That's one thing I think he's telling you. This is the aeonen of the Messiah. Number 2, he makes a very interesting, obtuse statement. The time of the gods is what? Eternal. You know what I'm saying? You can read, this is that kind of Greek. I told you, Greek is really concrete, but the Greek writers love to stick in stuff that you go, wait. What are you really saying here? Right? If he said it was a pathos, or if he said it was a hora, a period of time, or an aeonen, you'd go, well, I get that, an age, a time, but instead he uses the word chronos. Chronos means, can mean eternal. It can mean the time that God just chooses, right? But if you read it that way, you go, what are you, are you saying you're God? Again? Is that what you're telling us? But look what he says. I lead under forward to he having sent me. That's really different than, and then I go unto him that sent me. He's not saying I'm going back to he who sent me or going to he who sent me. He's saying I am leading you forward to the one who sent me. And that, look at what he said, how he says that. If it's just a short period of time now, it could relate to his crucifixion, right, and death, and to salvation specifically in that sense. But the way it says in Greek, it can mean a short-term sense, but it can also mean a long-term sense. It can mean, well, wait. John told us from the beginning, he was the Word. He was the command word of the creation. Could he be saying from the very beginning of creation, I've been here to lead you under forward to he having sent me? Let's see what the response is. That might tell us. Okay? You will look for me, but you will not find me. And where I am, you cannot come. This goes into this whole dialogue. Now, I think this dialogue is very easy to understand if you think within the construction that I just told you. Okay? You shall seek me and shall not find me, for where I am, thither ye cannot come. Then you seek to worship or plot me, Kai and, no or not, you will find. That's just, you will find me, and hope whatever, where, imi ego. Imi ego. You know or not, that is, you are powerful, able to come or go. You will seek to worship me, and you will not find me. And wherever I am I, the Greek is not a question in Greek. Wherever am I, you are not powerful enough to come. In other words, how do you get to where Jesus is trying to lead you? He says it right here. And I lead under forward to he having sent me. And then he tells you in the next one, look what he did. He changed the order, but it's ego eimi. Right? That way, this time when he says it, what will you, he's 3 verses, 3 statements in a row. He said ego eimi, he said imi, and he says imi ego. This, I think, is really cool. The first one, you go, huh? He said he was God. The second one, you go, did he say he was God? And the third one, you go, whoa, he reversed it. Anyway, I think this is it is an intentional step in the language of the use by Jesus, to get you to listen. You will seek to worship me, and you will not find me. And wherever am I, you are not powerful enough to come. So logical irony. It also is an unstated telos. The Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we cannot find him? Will he go where our people live scattered among the Greeks to teach the Greeks? Oh, I want to finish with this verse because this is so cool. Okay, remember I told you they're asking about the Christ. They're asking about the anointed one. So they're Hellenized. But what does this presume there's in the crowd? The other Greeks, right? Other Greek people. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go? What shall he find? Shall he find him? Will he go into the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? Now that's not exactly what it says. They said, according to Israeli, the Judeans, line to Judea, pro forward, hetos themselves. Now what locality he here it is attending to? This is a really cool Greek word. To transport, moving something from one destination port to another. Very Athenian. And he says it twice. That is because we, know or not, we will find him, not at least, the diasporan. The diasporan. That's diaspora. Dispersion. It means dispersion in Greek, but it sure sounds like the diaspora, right, that we talk about all the time with the Hebraic people. The Greeks, he is intending to transport, moving something from one destination port to another, and didexkian, to teach the Hellenes, the Greeks. Okay. Accordingly, the Judeans, blind Judeans, said forward to themselves, at what locality he is intending to transport, moving something from one destination port to another, that we will not find him, not into the dispersion of the Greeks. He's intending to transport, moving something from one destination to another, and teach the Greeks. Here is something really important to note. This word, poroeustanthai, is very specific Greek that means literally go from port to port. Okay, it means to move something for the purpose of trade. It's not just a general term that can be translated as transport something. It's like you got a UPS truck, all right? You take a UPS truck from one, well, I guess you do, from one side of Wichita to the other. Now you'd probably just drive it, right? But if you really want UPS, where are you going? You're going to Dubai, you're going to San Francisco, you're going across the nation because you're moving stuff, okay? So this the very specific Greek that means that, and specifically mainly refers to Athens or Athenian transportation. And I'm going to have to stop there, but this whole sentence is a very, very powerful sentence. And you can see what it appeals mostly to what? The Greeks and the Romans, and it's talking about diaspora. But I want to get more into that next week. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray, amen.